and that actually cache the entire animation range. The next option is active segment, which will only cache the time range defined on the track bar, and this is the default. And you then have custom, and the following start and end time parameters that you can see here become active when you've got this option turned on, and these allow you to define a specific time range that you actually want to cache between. The next option is the sampling flyout, and you've got three options here. You've got every frame, integration step, or every nth frame. So the default is every frame. So in other words, your particle simulation will actually run through, and on every frame it'll actually cache out the particles on that frame. Now if you've got your accuracy up here set to less than a frame, we can see we've actually got it set to less than a frame here. We've got it set to half a frame. Every half frame is not cached, and that means that obviously there'll be a slight slowdown on playback because it has to calculate the integration steps between each frame. If you especially if you're working in ticks, but generally caching out every single frame is what you want. The next option is obviously to be very accurate. You cache out every integration step. Obviously the thing you've got to worry about with that is that whereas now you're only with every frame saving out the particle data per frame, so with NTSC that would be 30 times a second. When you change the integration steps, you may be caching out the data, it could be hundreds of times a second, and obviously that can use up a huge amount of memory, and that can cause Macs to crash. So before you use the integration step option, make sure that your memory can handle it, or at least keep a very close eye on the memory usage when you're running through the particle simulation. The last option is less accurate than every frame. You have the option of caching every fifth frame, and obviously with that's a sort of workaround for when obviously you're using too much memory, and you really do have to have some kind of cache that will just cache every fifth frame, every fourth frame, whatever interval it is that you want to cache. And obviously when you click on play in the viewport, it will work out the frames in between, and it's good obviously for when you want to scrub backwards, because as an example, if you went up to frame say 74 up here, and then you wanted to move back to frame 73, all particle flow would have to do is to go back to frame 70, because you've cached every 5 frames, so it actually has the full flow up until that point, so it can just go back to that frame rather than having to go all the way back to the beginning. So actually using an nth interval is not such a bad option. The next option is cache test results, and this option only becomes useful when you're using the cache operator only on an event by event basis. And in this situation, this option stores the results of your tests in the event, so that the particles that tested as true can be sent on to the next event as quickly as possible. This is not necessary when you use the operator in a global manner, as I've done here, so turn this option off, as it will effectively use memory for no real benefit. The next option is save cache with file, and when this is active, particle flow will actually save the cache that's in memory out to hard disk within the max file itself. This can be useful for network rendering, which is something that I discussed earlier, but you should note however that it can lead to some really very heavy max files, i.e. if you've used a gigabyte of RAM or larger to actually store the cache, when you save out to disk, your max file will also be that big. Obviously if you've got compression turned on, that may get compressed down, but you're still talking about very, very large max files, so that's something you have to consider when using this value. The next option is save cache with hold. That's very, very similar. When you use the hold feature in Max, which does a temporary save of your file, obviously when you're working on files, every now and again you may want to do a hold just in case of a crash, and then you can use a fetch to bring that file back very quickly. If you do that, the default behavior of the cache operator is to not actually save out